British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has got himself into a bit of hot water, claiming the UK's vaccine rollout success was a result of capitalist greed. This comes as parts of Europe are considering further lockdowns and tougher export controls of vaccines. Joining me now is our UK correspondent, Olly Barratt. Hi, Olly. So what exactly did the Prime Minister say, and what's been the fallout?
Boris Johnson was talking about how the UK has managed to get its hands on more doses of vaccines than other European countries and roll out those doses more quickly as well. And he appeared to say that it was because of greed with regards to the capitalist nature of how Britain did its procurement. Now, he very, very quickly on this call with his own Conservative MPs told them that he didn't want them to tell anyone he'd said it, that he regretted what he had said, and there have been a couple of explanations since about exactly what he meant. Some have said that he's just invoking that oft-repeated phrase about capitalism being linked to greed and saying that actually in this case, look, we've used capitalism to get our hands on a lot of vaccines. Others say he was simply making a joke about one of the other MPs that was on the call. Either way, it doesn't look particularly good when he's embroiled in a row with the European Union as we speak about Britain and vaccine doses and whether or not they are heading back and forth towards the European Union in the appropriate quantities.
Let's focus a little more on Europe. A moment ago, you tweeted that the EU's on top of the vaccine export issue, so much so it's cracking down on exports to itself. Obviously, you were joking there, but what exactly did you mean, and what's going on with that issue?
Well, because the European Union are discussing exactly how and when and on who to put export bans of vaccines in place. They're worried, for example, with regards to the UK, that doses of the Pfizer vaccine made in the European Union are making their way to the UK, but doses of the AstraZeneca jab manufactured in the UK aren't making their way back to the European Union. So they're looking at putting controls in place, and they're getting very worried about whether all this is equitable. There was a raid at an Italian plant. It appears that some officials wondered whether the AstraZeneca jab was being stockpiled there in some way and was bound for the United Kingdom, and that perhaps the European Union would need to put some controls in place over those doses. It now appears, according to AstraZeneca, that actually those doses in Italy that were raided by officials were bound for the COVAX facility for developing countries and for the European Union. So clearly there are raised tensions here which are leading to some missteps. We have a European Leaders Summit in Brussels on Thursday, which will actually be held remotely because of the COVID outbreak, at which European leaders will discuss whether or not to put export bans in place on some European countries, including the UK and others around the world as well.
Talk to us about Germany. We understand they were considering tougher lockdown restrictions over the Easter period. Now, that's something that's being discussed here as well. What is the latest? What is Angela Merkel saying?
Yeah, not just considering, it was announced by Germany that there would be a really tough lockdown over the Easter weekend, restrictions on worship gatherings, for example, restrictions on exactly what hours people could be outside and what would be open in terms of retail over the Easter weekend. Today, Angela Merkel has had to apologise and say she made a mistake and that it was not an implementable plan, and so has rowed back from that. So there is not going to be a tougher lockdown in place over the Easter weekend, although there are some pretty stringent restrictions still in place in Germany. But the Chancellor, Angela Merkel, clearly felt that despite having made that decision, it simply wasn't going to be enforceable, and she's made now a U-turn and apologised for it. But we are seeing in some other countries extra restrictions being added as well leading up to Easter, notably in France and in Belgium today, lockdown restrictions announced as well, as the outbreak does continue in many European countries to grow really quite quickly.
What about the issue back in the UK, scientists urging the Johnson government to beef up border controls? We were just chatting to our colleague in India about new variants coming out of India. What is the latest on how much the UK is going to cut itself off from the rest of the world?
Well, Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister, has been speaking about this just in the last couple of minutes or so, and he's been asked, for example, about France. Britain's very close neighbour, but also incredibly important route for lots of goods and medicine which flow between the UK and Europe. And there are some who are calling for France to be put on that red list of countries in terms of travel, from which anyone travelling to the UK would need to hotel quarantine for a couple of weeks. And the reason that is being talked about is that British scientists believe that the South African discovered variant and the Brazilian discovered variant are now spreading more and more quickly inside France. And so some here are saying we should really put up the barricades even more than they already are. Boris Johnson saying that he will look at it, that he'll take whatever measures he has to, but he does say it would lead to huge disruption for trade and would be very difficult for that reason. More broadly, the UK's travel task force is due to report in early April about the medium and long-term future of international travel.
Right.
Many Brits, of course, hanging out for a European summer holiday. At the moment, it looks very difficult given the trajectory of the outbreak in many European countries.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. That is our correspondent in London, Olly Barratt.